Good morning, Grade 9. Grade 9 Samaria, Sinai, and Shiloh. Today we are going to talk about the types and classification of baked products. So ano nga ba yung bakery products na tinatawag? They are any bread, biscuits, pretzels, crackers, buns, rolls, macaroons, or any similar pastries, cakes, donuts, pies, or other food products of which flour or meal is a principal ingredient. There are four expected learning competencies from this lesson. 1. Identify the different types of bakery products. 2. Discuss the characteristics of different types of bakery products. 3. Bake different bakery products, and of course, identify the causes of poor quality breads. Be sure na na-review ninyo ang content ng bread and pastry production for week 1. Ang content nito ay tungkol sa different major and minor baking ingredients, ganun din naman yung mga abbreviations used in baking. For week 2, ang content naman ng lesson na ito ay tungkol sa various baking tools and equipment and their uses. So, we were able to identify the different baking tools and classify them according to their uses. Let us begin the different types of baked products by introducing a donut. What is a donut? Ang donut ay meron tayong dalawang main categories. Merong yeast donuts and cake donuts. They are sweet type of deep fried pastry, popular in many countries and prepared in various forms as a sweet snack that can be homemade or purchased. Brownies goes well with hot beverages such as coffee, tea, or milk. At ang brownies ay meron siyang iba't ibang categories. Merong cakey, fudgy, and chewy. Yung cakey brownies are light, moist, and airy, and it has a slightly fluffy cake-like interior. While fudgy and chewy brownies are moist, dense, and gooey with almost the texture of a fudge but not quite as compact. So they are popular baked chocolate desserts baked similarly like cakes. How about a bagel? Ano naman ang bagel? Ang bagel ay isang type of bread that is small, hard, and in the shape of a ring. So ito yung most popularly consumed kind of bread made by yeast dough that is rolled, boiled, and then baked in an oven. Croissants. They are made by baking puff pastry and yeast dough together in layers. Croissants are traditionally eaten for breakfast and often served with coffee in European countries. Chocolate croissants are baked the same way but with a piece of dark chocolate placed in the dough first. So what are croissants? They are flaky, buttery, and rich rolls shaped like crescent moons. Pies are not only popular during snack time, but can also be filled with meats and eaten at dinner time. So what are pies? They are a baked dish usually made of pastry dough, casings that covers or completely contains a filling of various sweet or savory ingredients. So meron tayong mga traditional varieties of pies dito sa bandang Laguna, yung buko pie. Meron din yan sa Tagaytay. Meron din tayong tinatawag na traditional varieties of pie such as apple pie, strawberry, blackberry, cherry cream, custard, lime, and lemon meringue. After pies, we have pastries. These are sweet baked foods made of dough, especially the shortened paste used for the pie crust and the like. My favorite flavor of muffins is blueberry. Blueberry cheese muffin. Sarap. How about you? Ano kayang muffins ang gusto nyo? So what are muffins? They are individual, cup-shaped quick bread with wheat flour, cornmeal, or the like and baked in a muffin pan. How about a bun? Buns are usually made from flour, sugar, milk, yeast, and butter. Common varieties contain small fruit or nuts, topped with icing or caramel, or filled with jam or jelly. Other types are filled with various meats. So what are buns? They are small, sweet bread or bread roll of different shapes and flavoring containing dried fruit. Pretzels is a puff pastry that is very flaky in texture and buttery and flavor. Pretzels are made by combining wheat dough with butter or fat, then rolling the mixture out many times over. How about puffs? What are they? They are light pastry cakes, typically one made of puff pastry containing a sweet or savory fillings. Ang rust naman ay familiar or similar sa toasted bread. Ito yung binibigay natin doon sa mga bata kapag nagsisimula na silang tubuan ng ipin. Yung kanilang mga gums parang makati or masakit kaya gusto nila lagi silang may kinakagat. So ano ba yung rusk? They are light, dry biscuits or pieces of twice-baked bread, especially those prepared for use as baby food. Tortillas can be made from corn flour or wheat flour and always baked on a griddle. Tortillas can be eaten plain or wrapped around various fillings. Tortillas are the base for burritos, tacos, and a multitude of other dishes. So what are tortillas? They are thin, flat pancakes of cornmeal or flour, and it can be eaten hot or cold. Basically, there are two types of breads. They are quick bread and yeast bread. So ano ba yung similarities and differences? Paano ba natin malalaman kung ito ay quick bread or yeast bread? Pagka quick bread, ang ginamit na leavening agents ay baking soda and baking powder. So both of these usually have salt added to the recipe to help activate the leavening agents. Quick breads are not left to rise before baking. So hindi na yan iniintay na umalsa bago pa ipasok sa oven. So ano ba yung examples ng quick breads? Yung mga biscuits, banana bread, corn bread, muffins, cones, and loaf bread. So they can also include some pizza crust, donut recipes, cookies, cakes, and pancakes can also be considered as quick breads. How about the yeast breads? Pag sinabi nating yeast bread, these are the breads that uses yeast as leavening agent. Typically, sugar or honey is used as catalyst to activate the yeast so that the bread will rise. So, yung bread is left to rise for 1 hour usually until it doubles in size. And it may be punched down and allowed to rise again before baking. So, what are the examples of yeast bread? Ito yung loaf bread, yung kinakain yung white bread, wheat bread, whole grain bread, rye bread, yan yung loaf bread. Meron din tayong ilang crust recipes na yeast bread ang category, pero meron din tayong mga donuts na yeast bread ang category. Moving on to the different types of yeast bread, we have basic white bread, sweet white bread, whole grain bread, batter breads, and sourdough breads. For the yeast dough, we have two kinds, the lean dough and the rich dough. So yeast dough is the blank canvas of baking. You can make it plain or add different ingredients to create variety of products such as breads and cakes. So pag sinabi nating lean dough, it is a dough. Pag sinabing dough, ito ay flour mixture that is low in fat and sugar and it used to make hard crust bread such as rolls like French and Italian breads and pizza crust. How about a rich dough? Rich dough is a yeast-based dough containing butter, cream, and some kind of fats or egg. It produces a bread with a soft and tender cake-like texture. Ano yung examples nito? We have the rolls, coffee cakes, and other sweet varieties. So parang yung lindo, hindi mo siya makakain alone without any fillings or toppings. Pero yung rich dough can be eaten alone. Bakit? Kasi it contains butter, cream, and some kinds of fats and eggs. Ibig sabihin, may lasa or mas masarap. There are three basic methods of mixing a dough. We have straight dough method, modified straight dough method, and sponge dough method. Ang straight dough method is the simplest and most common way of mixing yeast dough. In this method, you will mix all the ingredients together at the same time. When the ingredients are mixed, either by hand or in a mixer, the yeast develops immediately. How about the modified straight dough method? This method breaks the straight dough method into steps that allow for a more even distribution of sugars and fats throughout the dough. This modification is commonly used when preparing a dough. So sabi dito, soften natin yung yeast and then combine the fat, sugar, and salt until it is well combined but do not whip. And then gradually add eggs to the sugar-fat mixture and then add the rest of the liquids and mix briefly. Add the flour and the yeast last. Mix until a smooth dough forms and then knead. The third method of mixing dough is what we call sponge dough method. This is prepared in two stages, which gives the yeast action a head start. The bread has a slow rise that allows for a longer shelf life along with better flavor and texture. So remember, the mixing methods for yeast dough are straight dough method, the modified straight dough method, and the sponge method. Each of these methods gives its own distinct characteristic to the finished product as well as affects the activity of the yeast and the formation of gluten. Moving on to the temperature ranges in bakery products. The baking process transforms dough into a light, readily digestible, and flavorful product under the influence of heat. Within this baking process, the natural structures of the major dough constituents are altered irreversibly by a series of physical, chemical, and biochemical interactions. So what are the different changes? So meron tayong changes that are caused by oven heat. We have five. One, expansion in volume. This is what we call oven spring. Oven spring is the volume increase during the initial stage of baking. During the oven spring stage, the crust begins to form and cause the breaking and shredding of the upper crust. Number 2, formation of the crust. 3, inactivation of yeast and enzymes. 4, coagulation of the proteins present in the flour. And 5, partial gelatinization of the starch. The formation of the new substances such as caramelized sugar, pyrodextrins, and aromatic compounds also happens during this time. The quality of baked products is influenced by the rate of heat application and the amount of heat supplied, the humidity in the baking chamber, and the baking time. Now, the heat transfer in the oven and in the bread. The heat transmission modes play important roles in baking. Their relative importance depend on the type and the design of the oven. So, ang heat ay transmitted sa dough sa three different ways. Meron tayong radiation, convection, and conduction. So, ano ba yung radiation? This mainly happens when there is a red-hot surface in an oven in a traditional pizza oven. How about convection? This is caused by the turbulence of the air in the oven. Merong transfer ng air. Yung conduction naman is where the dough is in contact with the heated surface like the heart or the sides of the pan. So during the baking process, the heated internal surface of the oven emanates visible infrared rays called radiant heat. This heat is absorbed by the exposed surface of the product, which increases their temperature. Thermal radiation, on the other hand, is a process in which energy is emitted by a heated body in the form of electromagnetic radiation. Infrared rays travels at the speed of light directly to the point of absorption. This kind of thermal radiation is the most complex mode of heat transmission. Moving on to the different causes of poor bread quality. Poor flour. A cheap flour in an expensive flour because it makes a loaf inferior in texture, color, flavor, and volume. Another is old yeast. Dead yeast plants cannot leaven bread. Old compressed yeast cakes or dry yeast that has been stored away will act very slowly, if at all, and will not give best results. Number three, too much or too little kneading. Over-kneaded dough becomes sticky and will not rise well in an oven. Under-kneaded dough makes strict bread, poor in texture, which sometimes contains lumps that might have been worked out in the kneading. For number four, we have too much flour. Too stiff dough rises very slowly and produces a loaf with poor flavor. Over-rising. Too long rising gives a very porous loaf with little flavor, a pale crust, and a porous crumb with broken, irregular cells. Ito yung may butas-butas. This bread crumbles badly, and if the rising continues too long, the bread is sour. So kung meron tayong tinatawag na over-rising, meron ding under-rising. This gives a bread of dark crust with blisters just under the crust. The loaf is small and flat. It browns easily in the oven. Such dough is said to be green. Too cool oven. The bread will continue to rise too long if the oven temperature is too low. The result is bread is very porous in the center and upper part of the loaf. So kung may too cool oven, meron tayong too hot oven. The dough crust cover immediately and cannot continue to rise the first 10 or 15 minutes in the oven, and the crust may break as it is forced unusually on the one side more than the other. The crust becomes very brown while the center is underdone. For number 9, we have mold. The bread wrapped while hot molds quickly. Kaya dapat pinapalamig muna bago man nag-undergo ng packaging. Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na cooling rack. Containers used for storing bread should be washed and aired frequently and immediately if mold is found. Are you learning, guys? I hope you are. So in closing, allow me to read a verse from the book of John chapter 6 verse 51. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. For our written works and performance tasks, see you later inside our virtual classroom. This has been your teacher, Malou Obispo, saying thank you for listening and may God bless us all. Goodbye!